Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today, we are going to be talking about a lot of stuff, really, but one of the things that we wanted to really dive into was the way that, so we've shared before, Ashley and I have shared before how we were Christians in the past and really decided to let that go and that it wasn't really serving us anymore. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit, talk about our deconstruction process and what that looked like for us. Because I'm sure that there are other people out there that are like, well, this is how I was raised too, and I don't really know what it's going to look like for me as I'm moving forward in my life. So yeah, so it's going to be fun. But in case we haven't met, my name is Karin Angelly, and I'm one of your hosts here.
And my name is Ashley. And yeah, I'm excited to dive into this topic because, as I'm sure you were as well, I was so invested in the church. And then as you kind of step out of it, like I know me as a person, I was like, oh, I need to save people that don't believe.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to spend eternity in hell. And this is what we were talking about. So now I'm like, oh, I bet you the people around me feel that like pressure or judgment or whatever it is to be like, oh my gosh, like I have to bring this person back. And so it's always a little bit of a touchier subject around those people to not feel like we're like lost, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so, and then also be able to share like the truths that we still see and everything like that. And that, like how you said it, where our deconstruction was. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, I mean, this wasn't an easy process for me, like it probably wasn't for you either.
mhm.
But when I started my deconstruction, I started it years ago, probably around maybe a little longer than 10 years ago, but it was a very slow process for me. And it showed up in different ways, how I was deconstructing and how I was kind of like changing my thoughts and going, wait, does that actually serve me? Like, I'm not sure that I actually believe that anymore because I had grown up with it. Like, I literally was born in a household where it was like, this is what we believe, period, end of story. And
Mhm.
for me to let that go, it kind of felt like a part of me was dying. And it wasn't easy to let that part of me die because it was like, well, but wait, this has been defining me for so long. And as I kind of went through this like 10 plus year deconstruction process and finally was able to let things go and be like, actually, that doesn't serve me anymore. It was really freeing, to be honest. It was really
Mhm.
freeing to be like, wait, I don't need to think like that. But like you said, there are still things that I can still look back at the Christian faith and be like, either I'm really grateful that I was taught that because that actually did help me. And I do still see that as a piece of the puzzle that is important, but I had to shift in how I looked at it. So it was one of those things that as I reframed things and shifted how I looked at things, it's like I could continue to use the thought process, but not necessarily use that exact same principle. Um,
Mhm.
so it helped me kind of with my deconstruction where it was like, okay, I can let these things go. And there's certain things that I can continue to hold on to. So yeah, I don't know what
Yeah,
you,
for sure. Well, exactly, because there's a lot of things about the Bible, like how God asked people to kill their kids as
right.
sacrifices. And, so there's a lot of things that are like, oh boy, like that's a hard one. That's in the Old Testament, though. So we don't
Right.
really need to worry
Oh
about that.
God. Yeah. I can't handle that when Christians are like, oh, well, that's Old Testament God. It's like, but then the next sentence they say, God is the same today, yesterday, and forever. And it's like, do you hear the contradiction you just said? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. And so that's like, there's those things that we put like off to the side of, we don't talk about that.
Mm.
And so obviously with the deconstruction, all those things kind of came to the surface, but there was also like one of the things we were talking about earlier today, like we are made in God's image.
Mhm.
And I was taught that meant that I had a soul and like other animals don't have a soul and all of that. And that always was really hard for me.
Yeah.
And then when I was introduced to like the more spiritual aspect of it, it was like, no, like you are God. Like I am God. I am source, and we are made in God's image. Like we are God, we are source. And that for whatever reason just made so much more sense to me. And when I heard that, I immediately clicked to it. It was a little bit of like a, okay, I have to like deconstruct like the whole like mentalities around it, but I aligned with it super fast, and a lot faster than the whole like, oh, that means I was born with a soul.
Yeah,
And
no, I agree with that for sure. Cause it's like, well, wait, what happens to my beautiful Fido whenever Fido dies? Like, what about that
yes,
little soul? I don't know what to do with that.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, that was always a really hard thing for me, was that they don't have a soul. I'm like, there's so much wisdom, there's so much compassion, there's so much intuition in animals. And I'm like, that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Mm-mm.
So it never aligned at all. And then I met people that could communicate with animals. And now if you see the TikToks or the TikTok, people will have the little buttons for their animals to
Yeah.
talk with.
Oh, I
And
love
I'm like,
that. It's so fun to
they're
watch.
just like, there's no way.
Yeah,
There's
there's
no
no
way.
way that they don't have some sort of like um understanding and a soul. Like that just doesn't tick with me either. I actually am reading a book right now. It's so friggin' fascinating. But he's talking about the differences in the brain between the human brain and the animal brain. And
Mhm.
basically it's just talking about how the midbrain and the hindbrain, which are like the two back
Yeah.
parts of your brain, are developed just like ours of an animal. Okay. So like you open your dog's brain and it looks the exact same. The back 2/3 of the brain looks the exact same. The difference is in the forebrain, which is like where your neocortex and the front of your brain is that we have a little bit more of a logical side to us that maybe, and that's not even the right word, but we just have more of a critical thinking. There's more to it than that, but we have more of that than an animal does, whereas an animal has the hindbrain and the midbrain are more of the instinctual stuff. So it's super fascinating. And as you look at that, at the same time, there are animals too that do have a neocortex as well, that forebrain, and it's just not as far developed as ours. So it's like, okay, wait a minute. Like when you say that an animal doesn't have a soul, like you said, that just doesn't jive with me either, because there are so many people that can have conversations with an animal. What are they feeling? Like,
Yeah.
what is going on with them? Because I mean, like you personally, if you have a dog and you don't feel good, a lot of times dogs will know that you don't feel good and they just want to
Yeah.
snuggle up with you. Like
Oh, for sure.
there's something about that. So it's like, yeah, it's missing something. So
I don't know. This is again always so off, but my soul baby, as I called him, passed away almost 2 years ago now, and it was one of those moments where he just went into, like, we lived on an acreage. He went into the acreage overlooking the lake, one of my favorite places on the acreage, and laid by wildflowers underneath a beautiful big tree, and he passed away.
oh
And
sweet.
he just left that
Mm,
morning and never came back. And
mm,
so obviously heartbreaking, and I may break out of tears, but I was always so sad that he did that, but also knowing the amounts of money that I would throw into keeping this dog alive. This was like his last gift to me, because I would never be able
yeah.
to call it.
Yeah.
Um but because I never got to know what went on or why it happened or anything like that, I reached out to an acquaintance, as one of my mentees, who actually lives near me. I've met her once. She does not know anything about this dog or my life with him, doesn't have me on social media or anything. And I said, I was told that you can communicate with him and let me
Mm,
know what happened, why he chose to do that, all that kind of stuff. Like, I needed the closure massively,
mm,
especially someone that would have poured everything into keeping this dog
yeah.
around.
Of course. Yeah.
Um, and so she communicated with him, and she told me things that some people, because he was with me when I was single, with me for 15 years, like so much of my life was with him that other people wouldn't even know about.
Mm.
And she told me things that no one else would know from
Mm.
his perspective.
That's
And it was
wild.
like, holy cow. Like there's
Yeah.
no way
No
that
way.
these animals aren't here. So, and the same thing, like 2 weeks later, about my other dog, had an incident and almost passed. And I was like, okay, I need you to connect with her. I just want you to comfort her. And she again told me stuff about this dog, her personality, how it was. And she's a very unique personality. And it's just crazy. Like people can connect with animals because they do have a soul. They are connected to us. They are part of us, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I know that as I started on my spiritual journey, and I really truly kicked it off with meditation. That was literally, I started meditating like 9 years ago, right? And that's really what kicked it off for me. The more that I meditated and the more that I got closer to source, God, love, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. To me, it's the same entity. But the more that I got closer to me and closer to that feeling of that source, I was like, oh shit, we're all connected. Like it's literally everything, every animal, all the blades of grass, everything is connected. Like you can't differentiate. And when you do try to differentiate, you're living in lack. You're living separate from that source. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that causes so much chaos in our world today, because people are living forgetting that they are the I am. They're forgetting that they are connected to source, that they are oneness. They forget that. And so we're going through life frustrated, feeling anxiety, feeling whatever words you want to put in there, because we're forgetting who we actually are. Like it makes me sad. And when I started my deconstruction process, the thing that truly got me at the end of the day was we went to this Jewish synagogue, because my husband, he was in school for theology. He wanted to be, this is how deep we were in the Christian faith. He wanted to be a pastor inside the church, right? And so he was in school to become a pastor, basically. And one of his assignments was to go to a church outside of his religion and write a paper about it, like write a paper about what his experience was. So he chose a Jewish synagogue. And what really got me, this was like, I was really deep into Christianity at this point. What really got me was standing in that synagogue and experiencing these amazing people. Like these were like so open to sharing their faith with us. They were like doing all the things that you would experience, like going to a church, just being like, hi, welcome. It's so nice to meet you. Like my problem sitting there in that pew or whatever chair, I don't even know if they call them pews there. I don't know. That's my Christian upbringing. But I just looked at these people and was like, so you're telling me that all these amazing people right now, because they don't believe that Jesus is the only way to heaven, all these people are going to hell? Like I couldn't handle it. Like that was literally like the start of, maybe even could have happened before all that, but that was like the linchpin for me that was like, I can't do this anymore. This is not for me. I don't want to sit here and go, oh my God, this person's condemned to hell because they don't believe that Jesus is the only way. Like that didn't sit well with me. And like you said this at the beginning, like people that are Christians looking at maybe you or I and feeling like, oh my God, I need to save them. I remember feeling that way. Oh my God, I need to make sure that they don't go to hell. Like, I don't want that for them. And it came from a really good place. Like it really did for me anyways. It was like, I really don't want the worst for anybody. But then when you actually sit back and you sit in situations like that, where you go to like a Jewish synagogue and you're like, wait a minute, wait a minute, this doesn't work anymore, because these people have quote unquote the same God that I do. Like they're literally praying to the same God that I do. So how can I sit with that and be okay with that? That just didn't make much sense to me.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. And like even more so than that, like Jesus came and he flipped tables because people weren't getting the point. And I think a lot of it comes with man like very poorly translating the word.
Yes,
Um,
100%.
but also like the whole, I don't know what the purpose of it is, but I feel like the whole like Christian faith is all about like praying and asking and ask and you'll receive and all that kind of stuff. And so people kind of come at it from this like begging, desperate place of like,
Yeah.
I am a victim. Please give this to me, please. And it's like, no, it's like ask and receive, like not ask and see if you'll receive. And like move mountains and do things, like have faith and do them. And there's so many of us that just sit around and don't do anything. And I think that is the biggest deconstruction is like I'm asking for prayer for like my grandma who has cancer, like I'm hoping God will heal her. And it's like, or she could be like Jesus told us to be, because I do believe he was a prophet spreading the
100%.
same
Yeah.
thing I believe.
Yeah.
And we can be like, I am healing this, like this is done. And we've talked about that as well, where both of us have healed ourselves or healed in other ways, with other people and all that kind of stuff. And I believe that is because we are capable
Absolutely.
of that. And
Absolutely.
it's not a please do this, a desperation of praying to God and hoping he answers, or why didn't God answer, or that Nick Verajek, I don't know if that's how you say his last name properly. I saw him in person speaking once and like got to like meet him and kind of interact with him. And during one of his speeches, he said that he believes that one day God could give him arms and legs. So he's born without arms and legs.
Oh,
So he
that
has shoes.
guy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know who that is.
It might be I just butchered his last name,
That's
but
okay. Yeah. I got you.
he put shoes in his closet. And as a Christian seeing them, like, oh, that's so cool. God's so powerful. Like, he could give him legs and he could one day use those shoes. And then as a new, like, deconstructed spiritual person, I'm like, he gets to choose
Do
when he
that.
has
Yeah.
legs.
Oh,
Yeah.
one of the best representations of this actually happened recently. I was privy at an event. It was a meditation event, and we talked about Dr. Joe before, right? So, but I was privy at this event where we do coherence healings, right? So it's literally like we tap into that source, that oneness, that divinity in us already. And I'm telling you some of the wildest things, like Jesus healing moments happen for people, like
Sure.
literally the deaf hear, the blind see. I'm not even kidding you, like just wild stuff, because people are tapping into that I am power. And one of the most recent ones was at an event recently. And the whole week, this person was in a wheelchair, right? In a wheelchair bound. Think about that for a second. So like, these are the people that Jesus, like people are going to Jesus, like, I'm lame, I can't walk. Like, think about this for a minute. Somebody can't walk, hasn't walked in God knows how long. At the end of the event, at the end of the last coherence healing, literally gets up and runs down the fucking aisle of this retreat. Like, come on, people. This is Jesus stuff. Like, this is literally, this is us tapping into the power that Jesus told us that we had inside of us. And when you talk to people that have healed this kind of stuff, this deep stuff that they have lived with their entire life, maybe they were born with it. Like talking to this lady that's like, I was blind since I was born. Like, I have literally never seen a thing. And being like, now I can see what color my hair is in the mirror. I've never been able to see that before. When you talk to these people, they're like, I just literally felt so in love with the moment. I felt so in love with who I was. I felt so in love with the I am inside of me that nothing mattered. Nothing else mattered. And that is literally, I personally think that's what Jesus was telling us to do. Like, go and sin no more did not mean a lot of the stuff that they talk about in church. What it means is go and sin no more, as far as what are you ruminating over in your brain? What are the thoughts that you keep thinking that are not serving you? What is it that you're stuck on that you're not letting go? That's how you tap into the Christ consciousness, that I am power, that source, that oneness. Like, and that's how people are literally healing themselves. Like, we have this power. We have not because we ask not. Like, that is actually true, in my opinion. We're not asking, and we're not asking in the right way, realizing that we already have that connection to source, that connection to the I am power.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It's the whole distorting of everything. Like he talks about like what love is, because love is the I am power. He talks about like I am the way, the truth, and the life, because I am all of those things.
Yeah.
And we bring heaven on earth. And like the whole book of Revelation is, you can live in heaven or you can live in hell. And it's not this place that you spend after you die. You spend eternity there, wherever you are, based on what you're choosing in that moment.
Thank you. Yes. So true. And like, literally, I have said that before to Christians, and they just kind of look at me a little bit blank. And I'm like, I got to ask the question, like, how are you feeling right now? Do you feel like you're living in heaven right now? Because that's what you're creating at this moment. And like, that eternity in hell could literally be you living an eternity of you ruminating over what your parents did to you, or what your ex did to you, or whatever. You're living in hell right now, because right now is the only time that we have. And the beautiful thing is that you can be reborn again in an instant, just by deciding, you know what, I'm friggin' done. Like, I don't want to feel like that anymore. And I personally have experienced that, and personally have, as a result of noticing thoughts that aren't serving me, or things that aren't serving me, and letting them go, I have been like, oh, that's what was holding me back. That's what was keeping me in hell, or that's what was causing my pain. Like, I have literally woken up in the morning with a pounding headache and been like, you know what? I'm going to get rid of this. And I used to be the person that would be like, I need some Tylenol. That's the only way I can get rid of my headache. I was that girl, because I would literally have the headache for days if I didn't take Tylenol. But then now I look at it and I'm like, okay, it's game time. I know that this headache is a representation of me holding on to a lower level energy, a lower level frequency that doesn't serve me. So I'm going to choose right now to let this go. And I start every single day, I start with a meditation. And so I go into my meditation and I'm like, how do I want to feel in this meditation? I literally go through, how do I want to feel? What's the feeling I want to create? And what don't I want to think about and like continue to ruminate over? What are the things that I want to let go of right now? And when I go into meditations like that, that's literally how I let go of my headache in just a second. It's literally, it's the weirdest thing. I can go into the meditation with a pounding headache, and then I come out and I'm like, well, my headache's gone, because I created that, because I decided I was done in an instant. I don't want to feel like this anymore. And I can do the same thing with a simple breath also. Like, this is, I know you and I, Ashley, have talked about Kundalini risings before. I've figured out how to pull energy up with a single breath from my first chakra, pull it all the way up to my brain, and let that energy free the way that it needs to go. Transmute the energy with that Kundalini rising. And that is another way that I'm like, I could get rid of a headache in just one breath. Like, and it's really fun to be like, oh, this is cool. I can get rid of that energy that's not serving me. I can transmute that energy. And the thing with my Christian faith is that would always hold me back was that, oh, like, this is happening to me because God allowed it. And when I started to go, wait a minute, this is happening to me because I allowed it, it gave me my power back. It gave me the chance to say, oh, wait a minute, I can't blame anyone else but myself for what I'm experiencing right now. This is just like, this is something I need to look at me and what am I focusing on? What am I thinking about all the time?
Yeah. Well, I think too, something we talked about a little bit as well is sometimes something will strike us and it'll be like, oh, that stings. And then sometimes other things just fall off of us. And then that's to take a deeper look at what's going on inside. But yeah, something that you kind of were talking about before was how we choose how we feel. We choose if we're doing the heaven or the hell, and just the synchronicity of that. Like when you look at like Revelation, with like the new earth coming here, like how Jesus is going to bring a new earth. To me, like that was all like imagery and you know what I mean? And it is, we have a new earth. Like, have you read The Power of Now?
Yeah. Oh,
before?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like he talks about how he like was depressed and suicidal, and then he woke up one day and it was like everything was a different color and bright and blissful and beautiful. And it's because he realized who he was. And he then was living in this new earth. And there is that duality within us. So we do pop back and forth, but you can stay in that new earth space like forever, really, you know, like he does, the author of the Power of Now. And so it's something that is pretty cool. Like once you start looking at like what I love synchronicities of everything and how it all ties in together. And then the things that don't work, they don't tie into everything. Like same as what we were talking about with animals. Like you look at ancient cultures, whether it's like First Nations or Egyptians or Chinese, like everyone had some animal that they thought was wise and meant to be worshipped, or whatever it was, had wisdom. And so like we've always seen animals as something, and then all of a sudden like Christians are one of the only ones that don't.
Missing something, people.
Well, and this could be a topic as well, is like I believe the Christian church is so like westernized, and there's so much like patriarchy. And it's interesting with what's going on right now with like Jerusalem. And then I just was watching like Miss Marvel, like the TV show, and it talks about some of the history with like Pakistan and India and how it was like corrupted by Britain. And so I'm just like, oh man, like it's just that whole like Britain you know, like it's how it really has plagued our earth and our world, and it just doesn't stop. And so we've always had this new earth. It just was a matter of what lens are we looking through? Are we looking through with our like animal brain, as you could call it, if you want to, like the duality, however you want to say, or are we looking through with our I am source brain?
Absolutely. And like you said, like Christians are probably the only religion that don't, I haven't looked too deep into this, so I'm definitely curious now that I'm about to say this, but Christians don't really look at animals as having that soul. Like, I mean, you look at Native Americans, and they definitely looked at animals as having souls, and they were connected to them and that whole deal. And like, Christians, like, I do feel like they're missing something when they say, oh no, like Christian or animals don't have souls. And so it's like, well, but wait a minute, like, I feel like you're missing something there. So, but it's just, I don't know. It's interesting as I look back at the things that I believed when I was a Christian and what I believe now, and how things have drastically changed of who I was back then. Like I only really have one friend that I've continued to stay friends with from that time when I was a super duper Christian. And she will tell you, she's like, holy crap, Karin is a totally different person. Like, I don't even know who she is anymore. One of the examples that she gave, she was like, you and your husband were so Christian, because my husband went through the same deconstruction as I did, same time, which is wild. I think that that was so meant to be. But anyways, you and your husband, because she lived with us at one point, right? When we were super Christians too. she's like, you and your husband would sit out on the couch together and read the Bible. Like she's like, that's just who you were. Like, that's where you were. And I know like you and I, Ashley, like we don't do anything half-assed. So we were like really good Christians. We were really good at it. So
really good Christians.
yeah, I know that I was, because it was just like I really wanted to get it right, like, and then when I started to realize like is there a right and wrong, like, and going, wait a minute, is it more that it's effective or ineffective or right and wrong, and started to kind of grapple with that thought process, that it was like, oh, I had to kind of like really let go a lot of my Christian thoughts when I started to understand that thought process of the whole right or wrong versus the effective, ineffective, and what that did for my poor little brain. That was a difficult thing to kind of grapple onto, because I know like Christians, like we used to, or I used to be like, oh, they're wrong for doing that. And it's like, well, actually, is it effective or ineffective that they're doing that? So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to look back on my life and how I was and how I look at life now. One thing that my husband says all the time is, he's like, when I was a Christian, there was a lot of certainty. I just knew that I knew, like I held on to my faith so tightly, and it's like I couldn't let anything else in. But now I've opened my hand up, and what falls in my hand right now, I can just go, okay, and I can notice it and go, okay, does it serve me or not? And you can kind of let it go if it doesn't serve you, instead of holding on so tightly to something that may or may not serve you, because somebody told you when you were 5 years old that if you didn't say this prayer that you were going to hell. Because that's literally what it was for me. It was literally like, and I call this the whole Santa Claus movement, right? Like, if you don't believe this, you're a bad person and you're going to hell for all of eternity. So say this prayer, do this thing, and you can go to heaven, kind of thing. And yes, there's more to it than that, obviously, but it's that whole, like, if you're a good little boy, Santa Claus will come and give you presents on Christmas. Like, it's the same concept. And I know that maybe a lot of my Christian friends out there, like, I know actually one of my Christian friends that I say that to, she doesn't like it when I say that to her, but I'm like, this is just how I feel. Like, this is just like how I look at it now. And now I can look at that whole time period of my life and say, okay, it served me in some ways, and then in others it really just doesn't anymore, and I can open my hand and let it go, instead of hold on to something so tight that it's not able to breathe. So
oh, for sure. No, I love that analogy, and I think that's so true. And I think that is really the whole Jesus movement too. Like he was really trying to open up and not have such a black and white certainty. And
yes.
So I love that analogy, because I think that is so in alignment for sure.
Yeah. And you can look at a lot of the things that Jesus said and you're like, yeah, man was spot on with a lot of things. Like,
for sure.
He knew we were missing it. And I still think, like so many Christians, I do think that they miss it too, by being like, well, but Jesus is the only way. And it's like, well, wait a minute. What is he actually saying though? Like, so much of the Bible can be taken out of context, in my opinion. And in fact, I have a friend that went to seminary and he wanted to be a pastor, and he deconstructed during seminary because of the things that he was learning about the Bible and the theological backings for everything. And that's where he deconstructed, was in seminary. People, like,
crazy.
Yeah, because we're literally taking the Bible and we are taking it out of place. Like, we're not using it the way that it meant to be wrote and written. Words are hard. Okay. So, but it's interesting when I look at some of the stuff that I believe now and read the Bible now, I'm like, oh, that's what he meant. That's what this means. That's interesting. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, it's fun though to look back and be like, wait a minute, I don't feel like that anymore. And that's okay. So
Well, I think it still gave me a nice foundation for everything. it's much more freeing and open and loving now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which is hilarious because that's what I thought I had back then. And now I'm like, oh, this is what freedom actually feels like. This is what letting go of the chains actually feels like. That's new. Okay, that's nice. So, but yeah, so with that, I think we're going to call today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want a wrap. And like I always say, there's probably advice in there that you may or may not want, but you got it anyways. So you're welcome.
Or opinions you didn't want, but
exactly. So, but with that, if you are listening to us on one of your favorite podcasts, please give us a 5-star if you loved us. And if you're watching on YouTube, then let us know if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, and ideas of what you want to hear from us. Because I don't know about you, Ashley, but I like talking. So let's talk about stuff that you guys want to hear too. So let us know in the comments what you want to know, what you want to hear as well. So with that, this was fun. I actually want to talk about this stuff more because this to me is like, this is interesting. So yeah,
definitely.
But with that, I'm going to call it a wrap and I will see everyone next time.